Okay. CEM stands for Community Engagement Meetings, the meetings that you were able to go to on behalf of this enhanced EIS process, which when you have the time, you can step over there and there's a time frame as to when you get to speak, how the whole process goes through. There was a time period when we had a scoping hearing where we were able to give in our comments. The community was able to say these are the things that we see as negative impacts. Okay, having been invited to sit on the Two Bridges LSRD EIS task force, again, the intent was never to stop the mega towers from going up. Currently, there are two fights against the mega tower projects. One is to stop the mega tower projects through the LSRD zoning resolution, and the other is to stop the process allowing another process, which is the ULURP, that allows City Council to vote yay or nay on the proposals and decisions regarding the mitigation. My question to you is, which do you agree would have, which do you agree with, and how would you ensure that your process of choice is enacted presently and as a City Council person? So presently as a resident of the district and as a City Council person, if elected.
And I just want to note and add, since Margaret Chin is not able to answer that question, she is an advocate and is actually supporting, she and her supporters are advocating to fight for the ULURP in order, is that right? Yeah, fight for the ULURP in order to negotiate a little bit of a few crumbs out of the process, and thereby, and not to actually stop the mega towers, but drag it through this whole process.
The EIS process allows the community to be involved. Okay, you have a voice in the EIS process. During the ULURP process, you can only give testimony. Okay, so it goes in front of City Council, it goes to the Manhattan Borough President, it goes through a chain of command, but it doesn't come to you other than going to CB3, right? And if everybody doesn't come, then guess what? They vote on your behalf. So that's the ULURP process. This process, like I said before, you have the opportunity through the CEM, and what we're doing right now as LESSON, as Coalition to Protect Chinatown and Lower East Side, this forum, working with the candidates and the community. This is how we get to do this. The ULURP process, you will not be able to do that. So, question.
So I am fully supportive of the LESSON lawsuit. Because if you think about it, just like Tanya said, if you advocate for the ULURP, these buildings will be built. So when our councilperson says, I support the ULURP, she supports these buildings to be built. 3 weeks ago, myself and a few members of LESSON actually got together when she made that announcement and mobilized the community and held a press conference to educate people on the LESSON lawsuit. And that's what my campaign does every day. You know, if you have an issue, we want to give you a platform so everyone can know about it. And I encourage everyone to talk to Tanya and talk to the members of LESSON because their lawsuit is concrete. And I think it's the right thing that's needed for our community.
What we have to do is start the negotiation from scratch. You cannot enter into any negotiation where you concede to the other side 80% or more of what they want. So if I'm going to sit down at the table with developers, then I'm going to say we're starting from square one. In fact, square zero. Let's make it even better. And go from there. And ULURP process has failed so far in getting us what we want and actually stopping these developments. That's why there's a lot of power in environmental review and also bogging down these developments in the courts. And one thing we need, in order to get the courts to act, we also have to educate our friends and our neighbors about what's going on. One of the big issues that Tanya mentioned, and I appreciate all the work you do, Tanya, is sewage overflow. So there was actually an article in the New York Times about sewage overflow in New York City a couple of months ago. And most people don't know this, but every time there's a little rainstorm, and in fact, particularly when there's a downpour, raw sewage flows straight to our waterways because we don't have the sewage capacity to handle it. So what are our politicians doing? They are approving all of these new buildings with not 1 ounce of additional sewage processing capacity. No new subway stations either, by the way. And very few new schools. We already have a school shortage. So the bottom line is, folks, we don't have the infrastructure to keep up with it. And some of you may remember 3 or 4 years ago, there's a sewage treatment plant on the Upper East Side. It might be around 85th Street, if I remember correctly. It's right on the water. It actually broke down for about a week or two in the middle of the summer. And during that week, raw sewage was flowing continuously into the Hudson River. And people were outraged. If we actually educate our friends and neighbors about what's happening with all these developments, and that actually raw sewage is flowing into our waterways regularly, they will be outraged, and that's what we need to bring to the courts with the public behind it, and that way we can stop these developments. I know.
I just wanted to restate the question because it's a really important one, and there's 2 fights around the mega towers, and one will drag the process out and then eventually try to fight through a ULURP, and then the other is to enforce the existing large-scale residential district zoning resolution, existing protection, zoning protection for the waterfront area. Which fight do you agree with? What would you do if you were in city council?
Well, I just want to say that I have been speaking about the LSRD and working with Tanya for a while now, since the beginning, trying to research for her, trying to help her in any way possible. Margaret Chin has been saying, along with Gail Brewer, that these buildings were as of right. It's only now that actually I have brought up in forums that new buildings aren't minor site modifications, that she actually has talked about this at press conferences. The special permits that were issued were in 1972, and then they were updated in 2013 for some kind of, I forgot what kind, I think it was a medical facility of sorts. But my point to that is they are being railroaded. The waterfront is being railroaded. Right now, Margaret is saying that we can fight this if they call these buildings major modifications. Margaret Chin has been in office for 8 years. She could have been fighting the waterfront way before Tanya, Chinese Coalition, Lesson brought all these issues up. These issues were only now talked about as illegal, okay? Because it's an election year and it's a political sham that she's trying to pull on everyone here, like if we're stupid, like if we can't Google, like if we have no form of researching. I mean, the insult is like, to you guys especially, you guys are gonna have to look for a place to live in the next 3 to 5 years. Because when those buildings come up and the AMI goes up in the area, your greedy landlord, your parasitic landlord is gonna ask for your rents to be jacked up. So what I would do is fight, not even for major modifications, I would fight to go back to the special permits that were issued illegally and then find out when they sold those properties, if they paid $1 for them, okay? Because that's usually what happens when you're saying you're building something for a hospice, or you're doing like a Rivington House scam. They take public land, give it to people, flip it for money, and throw out the poor people, and I'm not with that. So I will be fighting with you when I'm your city councilwoman. Thank you very much.
I wanted to pass the mic back to Tanya to ask a follow-up question, because this is a very live and kind of ongoing battle, and I wanted to encourage everyone if you want more information and if you want to join this struggle lesson and the coalition to fight to stop these mega towers, please join us on August 30th at 6 p.m.
Okay, follow up. I think in front of you, you have an article about something that Margaret Chin just put out today. And basically what she's trying to do is pass a bill, a legislative law, requiring that there are no more pre-application processes, which means that you no longer would have to go through an EIS process, which means we would not have an opportunity to speak, right? So it would go straight to a ULURP, straight to City Council. That article actually says that City Council will have the authority and the power to decide on future developments. So my question to you is, do you agree with that, or are you against that, in opposition of that? And what would you change on a legislative position to secure us in future developments from coming into our community?
Thanks, Tanya. This is a very complex and very important question, because right now the press is spinning this as if it's a good thing for City Council. We'll have more power to block projects, but what we've seen, and as the candidates are pointing out, a lot of city officials, elected officials, are actually supporting developers to build these buildings. They're not trying to stop the mega towers, so cutting the community out of that process and giving City Council kind of total blanket powers to determine the future of our communities. What would you propose that's different from this bill?
Thank you, Tanya. I would propose that we actually have more community engagement. Even we saw it this past summer with the EIS. They only allowed us to have 4 EIS meetings. Only 4 opportunities to read all the research that was done, all the projects that are being proposed. That's not enough time when you're a working class mother or father and you have kids at school. And so when the community asked for additional EIS meeting, they almost didn't have it. And so as a city council person and as a legislator, I will make a bill that says if the community